Welcome back to the Bible study here for another week, and we're focusing on the next church here in Revelation 3, and that's the Church of Philadelphia. And while we had looked at Smyrna in the past, and that was one of those that really didn't have much of anything negative except for maybe what they'd been going through, it wasn't really a negative for them as a church, but this one here is one of the only two, and maybe one of the key ones that doesn't really have a negative associated with it. And again, it's the Church of Philadelphia. You can find it in Revelation chapter 3. It begins in verse number 7, and he begins talking to them about even in verse 8, he again goes back and tells them that he knows their works, and that's a common theme. But he also indicates there in verse 7 that it's the idea that he opens the door and nobody can shut it. And so it almost seems as though maybe they had been challenged somewhat in their ministry, maybe sometimes feeling a little bit like there's not a lot they could do. I don't know if that's the case, but it just, it kind of seems like he's reminding them, you know what? You may feel like there's not a lot that's being accomplished or that you can do, but I'm the one who gives you the opportunity. I'm the one that determines when or how that works. And it's not about everybody else and whether they think that you're the best or the greatest, that you're the most profitable church, but that he was. He was seeing it that way. And so he says, I've set before thee an open door, verse number 8. No man can shut it, for thou hast a little strength and hast kept my word and hast not denied my name. So there's several things there that are so important. He's focusing on it. He wants them to recognize, you've been faithful, and I am giving you the opportunity to go through this door and see things accomplished for his glory. And then he goes on and kind of says, I'm going to take care of your enemies. Don't you worry about them. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to bring forth fruit. Mentions in verse 10 about how they had kept the word of his patience, and then how he was going to keep them from the hour of temptation. And then he says also, behold, I come quickly. Hold that fast which thou hast, that no man take thy crown. And so, again, it kind of gives the idea there that maybe they were struggling a bit, maybe as a small attempt at, maybe I shouldn't call it that, but apparently maybe a smaller church, maybe smaller in opportunity in some ways, and yet he's reminding them, I know about this. I'm giving you an opportunity to really bring forth fruit and to do a great work. And so maybe for today, what we could take from this church, there's very little. There's not a lot, and of course, as far as we know, there's no real negative as far as condemnation of them. And hopefully that would apply to you as well, although we probably don't want to think of it quite the same way whenever it comes to, if we're also in a struggling church, or, it's just small, we wonder if there's going to be much accomplished. But maybe I could just remind you that when God puts before us an open door, that's his business. We may not feel like we're very successful, but he wants to give us victory. He wants to have us walk through that door. And when he gives us the opportunity, there's nobody else, however much they may naysay or try to discourage us because we're just little or because we don't have as many opportunities as some big church does, we can still be faithful. And it's interesting that two of these that seem like they're smaller or struggling, the other one, of course, being Smyrna, those two churches are ones that also did not have a condemnation of them. Now, I don't want us to get the mindset that it's somehow just us four and no more. The smaller we are, the more pure we are. That's not altogether true. But we do need to recognize when we do feel weak and insignificant and we wonder how God could ever use us, that there may be some real open doors that God is giving us. And when he does, a small church doesn't necessarily have to stay small. Maybe a struggling work doesn't have to keep struggling. But God can open the doors and give us opportunities for his glory. And so I would just encourage you today, look for open doors. It may not be that you can match up to some other, fancy church somewhere. Maybe the place, the ministry that is, everybody's admiring them and wishing they could be like them. It may not be like that, but when God gives us an open door, let's not minimize it because it's not as big as somebody else, as great an opportunity as someone else. Just do what God gives you the opportunity to do. And God help us to each one labor faithfully. I know that kind of goes back even to that church at Smyrna because it was a very similar idea there. Sometimes it's the small work, the struggling work, but God is giving us open doors for ministry. And so let's do our very best to mind Him and to do what He would have us to do. And let's hold on to those things that God has done for us. Don't ever give up what God has done because of a dissatisfaction somehow, and that we don't, just press on. Win those you can win. Labor among those that God has given you, and continue to do your very best to be faithful. That's what He really calls us to be. And of course, you see there in a sense, even verse 12, He says, "Him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple." He's going to write our name, or He would write upon us His name, and of course, basically giving us the hope of heaven if we'll stay faithful. So let's just do our very best. However small it may be, however much we may struggle, hold fast and then press forward and do what He'd have you to do. Well, God bless you this week. Let's keep faithful. Let's keep doing what He'd have us to do and overcome in the end.